The stars looked different from the bridge of the Harmony's edge. Captain Sora Lim stood watching the view screen as hundreds of alien ships moved around the massive space station called Nexus Prime. Ships with strange shapes floated past. Some looked like giant crystals. Others moved like flowing water. A few pulsed with bright lights that hurt to look at directly. "Are you ready for this, Hana?" Captain Lim asked. Dr. Hana Kim looked up from her datapad. Her dark eyes showed no fear, only focus. She had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. The trial of voices would decide if humans could join the Galactic Council. If she failed, humanity would remain alone among the stars. "I'm ready," Hana said quietly. "The translation matrices are complete for 11 species. Only the Silence Keepers remain." June Park, the ship's chief engineer, walked over to them. His face showed worry. "You've been working for 18 hours straight. Maybe you should rest before the trial begins." Hana shook her head. "There's no time. The council won't wait for us to be comfortable." She had good reason to push herself so hard. Hana was born with a rare gift. Her brain could process alien languages faster than any computer. Where other humans needed months to learn basic alien words, Hana could understand complex alien thoughts in hours. She was humanity's best hope. The communication officer, Dae-yun, turned from his station. "Dr. Kim, we're getting the first transmission from the trial coordinators. They want to begin in 2 hours." "Which species will we meet first?" Captain Lim asked. Hana checked her notes. "The Kalari. They speak through clicking sounds and high-pitched whistles. Their language has over 40 different tones. Then the Thanax, who use sounds so deep that humans can barely hear them." She had studied every known alien race for years. The Kalari were insect-like beings who lived in giant hives. Their clicking language was like a musical code. The Thanax looked like walking mountains and spoke in rumbles that could shake the ground. The Viridians were living crystals who talked through light patterns and electrical signals. "What about the Silence Keepers?" June asked. "You haven't told us much about them." Hana's expression grew troubled. "They're different from all the others. The Silence Keepers communicate through pure thought. They've never spoken to outsiders before. The Council archives say they agreed to this trial only because they're curious about humans." "That doesn't sound dangerous," Dae-yun said. "All first. Contact is dangerous," Captain Lim replied, "especially when we don't understand how it works." 2 hours later, Hana stood in the station's central chamber. The room was enormous with a high ceiling that seemed to reach toward the stars. 12 different environments had been created for each alien species. Some areas were filled with thick gas. Others had water pools or crystal formations. The human section looked simple compared to the others. The first aliens to approach were the Kalari. 3 insect-like beings clicked their way across the floor. Their bodies were covered in shiny green shells. Their eyes were large and black, reflecting the room's lights. Hana stepped forward and began to speak. She used the clicking sounds she had practiced for months. The lead Kalari tilted its head, listening carefully. Then it clicked back, faster and more complex than before. The watching crowd held its breath. Representatives from dozens of alien races had come to see if humans could pass this test. Many believed humans were too simple to communicate with advanced species. Hana clicked again, this time adding the high-pitched whistles the Kalari used for emotions. The alien's reaction was immediate. It clicked rapidly and moved its arms in, what Hana recognized as excitement. "Successful communication established with Species 1, announced the trial coordinator, a floating blob of gas called a Epherian. The Thanax came next. These giants moved slowly across the chamber, each step making the floor shake. They looked like walking rocks with glowing eyes. When they spoke, the sound was so deep that everyone felt it in their chests rather than heard it with their ears. Hana had prepared for this. She used a special device that could produce the ultra-low sounds the Thanax needed to hear. Her first attempt made them step back in surprise. She tried again, adjusting the tone. This time, the largest Thanax rumbled back in what she hoped was approval. One by one, Hana successfully communicated with each species. The crystal Viridians flashed their lights in patterns that hurt her eyes. The gas-based Epherians changed, colors while making sounds like wind through caves. Each success brought cheers from the human delegation. By the 10th species, Hana was exhausted. Sweat ran down her face and her voice was becoming rough. June watched from the observation area, his hands clenched with worry. "She's pushing too hard," he whispered to Captain Lim. "She has to," the captain replied. "This is our only chance." The 11th species was the most challenging yet. The morphlings could change their shape at will. They spoke by changing their bodies into different forms. Hana had to learn to read living sculpture as language. It took her 20 minutes, but finally she managed to shape her own body language into something they understood. 11 successful communications, the coordinator announced. 1 species remains. The chamber fell silent as the final test approached. The Silence Keepers had never been seen by most of the aliens present. Even their name was mysterious. No one knew what they looked like or how they really communicated. A section of the chamber's wall simply disappeared. Through the opening came a being unlike anything Hana had ever imagined. It was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to be made of flowing silver. Its face had no visible mouth or nose, only large dark eyes that seemed to hold the depth of space itself. The Silence Keeper moved without making any sound. Its feet didn't seem to touch the ground. As it approached Hana, she felt something strange happen in her mind. It was like hearing a whisper that came from inside her own thoughts. "I greet you, voice speaker of the young race." The words formed, in her mind without sound. Hana had trained for this moment, but the reality was more intense than she expected. She focused her thoughts and tried to project them outward, the way she had practiced with human telepaths. "I greet you, keeper of the silent wisdom," she thought back. The alien's dark eyes seemed to grow larger. Around the chamber, other beings watched in amazement. No one had ever seen successful communication with a Silence Keeper. But something was wrong. The connection between their minds was growing stronger, more intense than Hana had expected. She felt the alien's thoughts pressing against hers, not gently as she had prepared for, but with increasing force. "Wait," she tried to think, but the pressure in her head was growing painful. The Silence Keeper's mental probe pushed deeper, trying to establish the full connection their species used for communication. But Hana's human brain wasn't built for such contact. The neural pathways that allowed her to learn languages so quickly made her more vulnerable, not stronger. Pain shot through her head like lightning. She tried to scream, to warn the others, but the alien's mental touch had reached the parts of her brain that controlled speech. Her voice came out as a harsh, broken sound that echoed through the silent chamber. The last thing Hana heard before darkness took her was the sound of her own voice, crying out in agony as it was torn away forever. Hana woke up in a white room that smelled like medicine. Her throat felt like fire, and when she tried to speak, nothing came out, not even a whisper. Panic filled her chest as she touched her neck and found thick bandages wrapped around it. Dr. Minho Choi sat beside her bed, his face grave. He was the ship's doctor and had been trying to help her for 3 days. When he saw her eyes open, he leaned forward. "Don't try to talk," he said gently. "The damage is severe. The alien's mental probe burned through your vocal cords and damaged the speech centers in your brain." Hana's eyes went wide with fear. She pointed to her throat and mouthed the word, "forever." Dr. Choi nodded sadly. "I'm sorry, Hana. The damage cannot be fixed. You will never speak again." Tears ran down her face as the full truth hit her. She had been humanity's voice to the stars. Now she had no voice at all. She grabbed a data pad from the bedside table and typed with shaking fingers. "Did we pass the trial?" Dr. Choi shook his head. "The Galactic Council says the trial is incomplete. Without successful communication with all 12 species, humans cannot join the Confederation. They expressed regret about what happened to you, but they won't change the rules." Hana threw the data pad across the room. It hit the wall and shattered into pieces. All her work, all her sacrifice, had been for nothing. Humanity would remain alone in the galaxy because she had failed at the final test. June Park entered the medical bay carrying flowers from the ship's garden. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. He had spent every moment since the accident trying to find a way to help her. "I've been working on something," he said, setting the flowers on her table. A voice synthesizer that connects to your brain. If we can bypass the damaged areas. Hana picked up another datapad and typed. Will it work? I don't know, June admitted. The neural damage is unlike anything we've seen before. The Silence Keeper's probe didn't just destroy tissue. It changed the way your brain processes language itself. Captain Sora Lim arrived with more bad news. Earth Command was ordering them to return home within the week. The diplomatic mission was considered a failure, and keeping the ship at Nexus Prime was too expensive. We can't give up, June said. There has to be another way. The other species representatives have made it clear, Captain Lim replied. They're sorry about what happened, but Hana's sacrifice doesn't change the Council's decision. Rules are rules. Hana typed angrily on her pad. What about the Silence Keeper? Did it say anything? It left immediately after the accident, Captain Ni, Lim said. The Council coordinator said it considered the matter closed. Apparently, the communication attempt was unsuccessful from their perspective too. That evening, Hana sat alone in her quarters, staring out at the massive space station. Hundreds of alien ships moved around Nexus Prime like a dance of lights. Each one represented a species that belonged to something larger than themselves. Humans would go back to Earth, alone and forgotten. She tried to remember what it felt like to speak. The way words formed in her mouth, the vibration in her throat, the power of making others understand her thoughts. All of that was gone now. She was a translator who could no longer translate, a bridge that had been burned. Dae-Yoon came to visit with news from the communication center. The other crew members want you to know they don't blame you, he said. You did everything possible. You successfully talked to 11 species. That's more than any human has ever done, Hana wrote. But not enough. Maybe, Dae-Yoon said. But maybe this isn't over yet. The next day, Dr. Nami Seo, the ship's psychologist, came to see her. Doctor. Seo had been studying alien behavior and culture for years. She sat down across from Hana with a thoughtful expression. I've been watching the recordings of your communications during the trial, Dr. Seo said. Something interesting happened that everyone missed. Hana raised her eyebrows, curious. You weren't just translating words, Dr. Seo continued. You were reading their body language, their emotional states, their hidden meanings. The Kalari delegate said afterward that you understood their jokes. The Thanix representative mentioned that you grasped concepts they hadn't even tried to explain. Hana wrote, So what? I still failed. Did you? Dr. Seo asked. Or did you succeed in ways that the Council doesn't recognize yet? That afternoon, June brought his latest attempt at a technological solution. The voice synthesizer was smaller now, designed to attach directly to her throat. But when they tested it, the results were disappointing. The device could make sounds, but they were flat and mechanical. It couldn't capture the subtle tones and emotions that real communication required. I'm sorry, June said. His shoulders slumped in defeat. I thought I could fix this. Hana touched his arm gently and wrote, You can't fix everything. Some things stay broken. I won't accept that, June said. There has to be a way. But as the days passed, it became clear that technology couldn't solve this problem. The damage was too complete, too complex. Hana would have to find a new way to live in a silent world. Communications officer Dae-Yoon and cultural advisor Nari Song tried to keep her spirits up with reports from around the station. Various alien delegations were having their own problems. Trade disputes, cultural misunderstandings, and old conflicts were making cooperation difficult. It's strange, Nari Song said during one visit. All these species can talk to each other through translators, but they still can't seem to understand each other. Hana wrote, Talking and understanding are different things. Exactly, Nari Song said. Maybe that's something worth thinking about. On her last night at Nexus Prime, Hana couldn't sleep. She walked through the station's observation decks, watching the alien ships prepare for departure. Many of the species representatives were leaving too, their own diplomatic missions complete or abandoned. She found herself in the same chamber where the trial had taken place. It was empty now, the special environment shut down. The spot where She had fallen was marked only by a small stain on the floor. As she stood there remembering her last moments with a voice, Hana realized something important. The accident hadn't just taken away her ability to speak. It had forced her to see communication in a completely different way. For the first time since waking up in the medical bay, she didn't feel completely hopeless. Maybe her voice was gone, forever. But maybe, just maybe, she could find another way to be heard. The question was, would anyone bother to listen? Hana refused to return to Earth with the rest of the crew. Captain Lim tried to convince her, but Hana wrote on her datapad with firm letters. "I'm staying. There's still work to do here." "What work?" Captain Lim asked. "The trial is over. We failed." "Maybe the trial was wrong," Hana wrote. She got permission to remain on Nexus Prime as an independent researcher. The station commander, a tall blue alien called Commander Vex, allowed her to keep a small quarters near the diplomatic sector. Most of the other humans thought she was making a mistake, but June decided to stay with her. "Someone needs to watch out for you," he said with a sad smile. Hana began spending her days in the station's public areas, watching the aliens interact. Without the pressure of formal communications, she started to notice things she had missed before. The way different species moved when they were happy or sad. How their voices changed when they were lying or telling the truth. The Kalari clicked differently when they were nervous. Their usual sharp clicks became softer, more rushed. The massive Thanax made deeper rumbles when they were angry, but higher-pitched sounds when they were amused. Even the crystal Viridians pulsed with different light patterns depending on their moods. She started keeping notes about these observations. Dr. Namiseo, who had also stayed on the station, helped her organize the information. "You're seeing things that the universal translators miss," Dr. Seo said as they reviewed Hana's notes. "The machines translate words, but they ignore all the emotional and cultural context." Hana wrote, "Maybe that's why so many species have trouble understanding each other." Exactly. They can exchange information, but they can't really communicate. Their breakthrough came by accident. Hana was sitting in the station's main marketplace when an argument broke out between a Kalari, trader, and a Thanax customer. Both species were shouting through their translators, but neither seemed to understand what the other really wanted. The Kalari was clicking rapidly, its translator saying the agreed price was 50 credits for the energy crystals. The Thanax rumbled back, translated as, "The crystals are inferior quality. I demand a refund." But Hana could see what the translators missed. The Kalari's clicking pattern showed it was confused, not angry. Its rapid movements meant it genuinely didn't understand the complaint. The Thanax's deep rumbles included the harmonic frequencies that meant respect and politeness, not anger. Without thinking, Hana stepped between them. She couldn't speak, but she held up her hands in the universal gesture for peace. Then she began to move her hands in patterns she had learned from studying both species. To the Kalari, she made the slow, deliberate movements that meant, "Please explain carefully." To the Thanax, she used the low, sweeping gestures that showed, "I understand your concern." Both aliens stopped shouting and looked at her with surprise. Hana pointed to the crystals, then made a questioning gesture. The Thanax rumbled softly and pointed to a crack in one of the crystals that was invisible unless you looked closely. The Kalari saw the damage and clicked with understanding. It quickly selected better crystals and offered them at the same price. The Thanax rumbled with approval and completed the purchase. Both aliens thanked Hana before leaving, though she had never spoken a word. Word of the incident spread quickly through the station. Within days, other species were approaching Hana to help with their own communication problems. She couldn't speak, but somehow she could help them understand each other. Commander Vex called her to his office. "Dr. Kim, what you did in the marketplace was remarkable. Several species representatives have asked if you would consider mediating some larger disputes." Hana wrote, "What kind of disputes?" "Trade agreements that have been stalled for months. Cultural exchanges that failed due to misunderstandings. Some very important negotiations that could benefit everyone if successful." Hana agreed to try. Her first major case involved the gas-based Epherians and the crystal Viridians. Both species had valuable resources the other needed, but their negotiations had failed completely. The problem, Hannah discovered, wasn't language. Both species could communicate through translators just fine. The problem was that they literally couldn't see each other's emotional states. The Etherians communicated feelings through color changes that the crystal beings couldn't detect. The Viridians showed emotions through light pulses that the gas beings couldn't interpret. Hannah worked with June to create simple devices that could translate these emotional signals. A light converter for the Etherians to see the Viridians' feelings. A color projector for the Viridians to understand the Etherians' moods. The negotiation took only 2 hours once both sides could see what the other was really feeling. They had wanted to make a deal all along, but neither side had realized it. Incredible, Commander Vex said afterward. You've solved in 1 day what our best diplomats couldn't fix in 6 months. More requests came in. The insect-like Orcs needed help communicating with the plant-based botanics. The energy beings called Flux wanted to trade with the rock-like Stoneheart clan. Each case taught Hannah something new about the hidden languages that every species used without realizing it. Dr. Seo documented everything. You're not just helping individual cases, she told Hannah. You're discovering universal principles of communication that no one knew existed. Hannah wrote, every species talks with more than words, but they only pay attention to the words. And now you're teaching them to pay attention to everything else. The breakthrough that changed everything came when the Morphlings approached her with an unusual request. These shape-changing beings had been trying to establish trade relations with several other species, but the negotiations kept failing for mysterious reasons. Our translators work perfectly, the lead Morphling said, its body shifting between different forms as it spoke. But somehow we keep offending others without meaning to. Hannah watched the Morphling carefully. As it talked, its body unconsciously shifted into shapes that resembled the other species it mentioned. When it talked about the proud Kalari, it briefly took on an insect-like appearance. When it mentioned the territorial Thanax, it grew larger and more solid. She realized the problem immediately. The Morphlings were accidentally mimicking the other species during negotiations. To many aliens, this mimicry felt like mockery or disrespect, even though the Morphlings meant no harm. Hannah worked with the Morphlings to develop new protocols. They learned to hold stable shapes during important conversations and to ask permission before mimicking others. The change was dramatic. Within weeks, the Morphlings had successful trade agreements with 6 different species. You've given us back our ability to trust others, the lead Morphling told her. And more importantly, you've helped others trust us. As news of her successes spread, something unexpected happened. Other species began asking to learn her methods. They wanted to understand how to read the hidden signals they had been missing. June helped her create training materials. Visual guides showing how different species expressed emotions. Audio recordings of tonal variations that meant different things. Even scent profiles for species that communicated through smell. You're not just solving problems, he told her, one evening as they worked late in their shared lab. You're creating a whole new science, Hannah wrote. Not new, just forgotten. Every species knew these things once. They forgot when they started relying on translators. So you're teaching them to remember. She nodded and added, communication is more than words. It's about seeing, hearing, feeling what others really mean. Late at night, when the station was quiet, Hannah would stand at the observation windows and watch the alien ships moving through space. 6 months ago, she had been humanity's voice to the stars. Now she was something different, a bridge between species who had forgotten how to truly understand each other. She still couldn't speak. But for the first time since the accident, she began to think that maybe her silence was becoming something more powerful than her voice had ever been. 6 months after losing her voice, Hannah had become the most requested mediator on Nexus Prime. Aliens traveled from across the galaxy to seek her help with communication problems that had puzzled their species for generations. The station's main council chamber had been modified just for her work. Instead of the traditional speaking podium, There were screens and projection systems that could display the visual communication methods she had developed. Species that had never worked together before were now forming alliances and trade partnerships. But the biggest challenge came when the Viridians approached her with a crisis that threatened their entire civilization. "Our homeworld is dying," their representative, a massive crystal being named Brightsong, told her through pulses of desperate light. "The star that feeds our crystal cities is growing unstable. We have perhaps 2 years before our world becomes uninhabitable." Hana wrote on her communication pad. "Have you asked the Council for help?" "We have tried for 3 years, but our electromagnetic language does not translate the urgency we feel. To other species, our requests sound like simple information sharing. They do not understand that millions of crystal beings will die if we cannot find a new home." This was exactly the kind of problem Hana had learned to solve. She worked with Brightsong and her team to develop new ways to communicate the emotional weight of the crisis. They created visual presentations that showed the dying star's effect on Viridian cities. They developed sound patterns that conveyed the fear and desperation that the crystal beings felt. When they presented the case to the Galactic Council, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had previously ignored the Viridians' requests suddenly understood the terrible urgency of their situation. Within days, dozens of worlds offered to help with evacuation and resettlement. "You have saved our people," Brightsong pulsed to Hana, its lights shining with gratitude. "But more than that, you have taught the galaxy to hear what we have been trying to say for years." Word of this success reached even further across the galaxy. The most mysterious request came from an unexpected source. A message from the Silence Keepers, the species that had caused Hana's accident. The message was simple. "The one who lost her voice to gain understanding is requested to meet with the Keeper of Final Thoughts." June was worried. "It could be dangerous. We don't know why they want to see you." But Hana was curious. She wrote, "Maybe it's time to find out what really happened that day." Commander Vex arranged the meeting in a specially prepared chamber. The Silence Keeper who arrived was different from the one who had injured Hana. This being was older, with silver skin that seemed to hold the light of ancient stars. When it entered the chamber, Hana felt the familiar touch against her mind. But this time the contact was gentle, careful. The alien's thoughts formed words in her head without the burning pain she remembered. "I am deep thought traveling, keeper of our people's memories," the being communicated. "I come to explain what my young colleague could not." Hana nodded, ready to listen. "My people see through time differently than yours. We knew of a great danger approaching the galaxy, a storm of dark matter that will destroy many worlds. We have been trying to warn other species for many years, but our thoughts are too alien for them to understand." Hana wrote on her pad, "What kind of storm?" "A cosmic event that happens once every 1,000,000 years. The dark matter will disrupt star systems and make space travel impossible for decades. Many civilizations will be cut off from each other. Some will die." The weight of this information hit Hana like a physical blow. A galaxy-wide disaster that could destroy entire species, and the Silence Keepers had been trying to warn everyone. "When we learned of your gift for language, we hoped you could serve as a bridge between our minds and theirs. But the young keeper who tried to contact you was inexperienced. The neural connection was too strong, too fast. It damaged you when it should have enhanced your abilities." Hana wrote, "When will this storm arrive?" "Sooner than we first calculated. Perhaps 18 months. The galaxy must prepare, but they still cannot understand our warnings. Then we'll have to find another way to make them understand." Over the next weeks, Hana worked with deep thought traveling to develop communication methods that could convey the Silence Keeper's knowledge. They combined visual displays with electromagnetic pulses, sound patterns with scent markers, and movement with light. For the first time in their species' history, the Silence Keepers were able to share their thoughts with other beings without direct mental contact. The information they revealed shocked the entire galaxy. The dark matter storm was massive beyond imagination. It would sweep through dozens of star systems, disrupting gravity fields and making faster-than-light travel impossible. Worlds would be cut off from trade and communication. Species that depended on resources from other systems would face extinction. But there was hope. If the galaxy worked together, they could build shielded stations and evacuation fleets. They could stockpile resources and establish communication networks that could survive the storm. The key was cooperation on a scale never before achieved. This requires trust between species that have been enemies for centuries, Commander Vex said during an emergency council session. How can we possibly coordinate such an effort? Hana had been thinking about this problem. She wrote her answer on the main display screen for everyone to see. The same way we've solved every other communication problem. We learn to understand each other first. What followed was the most intense period of diplomacy in galactic history. Using Hana's communication methods, ancient enemies began working together. The warlike Keth Imperium partnered with the peaceful Garden Worlds. The proud Kalari clans coordinated with the humble scavenger fleets. Hana became the coordinator of this massive effort. She couldn't speak, but her silent presence at every meeting somehow made communication easier. Species that had never trusted each other began to share resources and technology. The biggest breakthrough came when the Morphlings offered to serve as living communication devices. Using Hana's protocols, they could temporarily take the forms of other species and help translate not just words, but cultural meanings and emotional context. Dr. Seo documented every development. "You've created something unprecedented," she told Hana. "A universal communication system based on understanding rather than just translation." June worked 18 hours a day building the technological systems that would support the evacuation efforts. "I can't believe we're coordinating the rescue of an entire galaxy," he said during one of their rare breaks. "And it all started because you lost your voice." Hana wrote, "Maybe I didn't lose it. Maybe I just learned to use it differently." As the storm approached, the preparation efforts accelerated. Entire populations were relocated to safer systems. Resource stockpiles were distributed across hundreds of worlds. Communication networks were hardened against the electromagnetic interference the storm would bring. The most dangerous part was evacuating the worlds directly in the storm's path. This required precise timing and cooperation between dozens of species. One mistake could cost millions of lives. 3 days before the storm's arrival, the last evacuation fleet departed from the danger zone. Every world that could be saved had been evacuated. Every species that wanted shelter had been offered safe harbor. The galaxy had accomplished the impossible through cooperation. As Hana watched the evacuation reports come in, she realized something important had changed. The galaxy hadn't just worked together to survive a crisis. They had learned to truly communicate with each other for the first time in their history. The Silence Keepers sent one final message through deep thought traveling. "The young one who injured you wishes to know if you can forgive what was done in ignorance." Hana wrote her reply. "Tell them that some wounds become doorways to greater understanding. They didn't take my voice. They helped me find a better way to use it." The dark matter storm was coming, but the galaxy was ready. And for the first time since losing her voice, Hana Kim felt that her sacrifice had meaning beyond anything she could have imagined. The dark matter storm hit the galaxy like a wave of invisible destruction. Stars flickered as gravity fields shifted. Space itself seemed to twist and bend as the cosmic event swept through system after system. But this time, the galaxy was ready. Hana watched from the command center on Nexus Prime as reports came in from across the affected regions. The evacuation fleets had reached safety. The supply stations were holding steady. The communication networks she had helped design were working. Despite the electromagnetic chaos, all primary evacuation zones report successful population transfers, announced Dae Yun from his communication station. Estimated lives saved, over 2 billion beings across 47 worlds. Commander Vex looked at the status displays with amazement. "In all my years of service, I never imagined such cooperation was possible. Species that wouldn't even trade with each other 6 months ago are now sharing their homeworlds with refugees." But the storm was far from over. For the next 3 months, It would continue to disrupt space travel and communication across a quarter of the galaxy. The real test would be whether the cooperation could last. Hana had prepared for this challenge too. During the evacuation efforts, she had trained thousands of beings in her communication methods. Every refugee fleet and shelter station now had teams that could help different species understand each other. The results were remarkable. Instead of the conflicts and resentment that usually followed mass relocations, the refugee camps became centers of cultural exchange. Species that had been isolated for centuries began sharing knowledge and technology. On the Kalari homeworld, crystal viridians were teaching the insect-like natives new methods of energy storage. The massive Thanax had opened their mountain cities to the gas-based Etherians, creating the first mixed-atmosphere communities in galactic history. It's not just survival, Dr. Seo reported during one of her research updates. These species are actively choosing to help each other. Your communication methods have created genuine understanding between them. The most touching moment came when a group of young aliens from 6 different species approached Hana with a special request. They had been working together in one of the refugee centers and had developed their own hybrid communication style. "We want to show you something," said the young Kalari, clicking softly with respect. The others gathered around, a small Thanax, a glowing viridian crystal, an Etherian cloud, and 2 others Hana didn't recognize. They began to communicate with each other using a beautiful combination of sounds, lights, movements, and scents. Each species contributed their natural abilities to create a rich, layered conversation that was part art, part language, and completely amazing to watch. "We learned this from studying your methods," the young Thanax rumbled proudly. "We call it the harmony speech. It uses every form of communication at once." Hana felt tears in her eyes as she watched them. These young beings had taken her work and made it into something even better. They weren't just overcoming language barriers. They were creating new forms of beauty through communication. As the storm finally began to weaken, another crisis emerged. The Galactic Council was facing its biggest challenge ever. With so many species displaced and traditional power structures disrupted, some members wanted to use the chaos to grab more territory and resources. The warlike Keth Imperium had been surprisingly helpful during the evacuation, but now they were demanding permanent control over several of the worlds they had helped evacuate. The proud Astral Federation was threatening to withdraw from the refugee support efforts unless they received preferential treatment. "The cooperation is breaking down," Commander Vex warned during an emergency meeting. "Without the immediate threat of the storm, old rivalries are returning." But Hana had anticipated this problem too. She had spent months building relationships with moderate leaders from every species. Now she activated a network of communication that bypassed the traditional council structure entirely. Instead of letting the politicians argue about power, she brought together the scientists, engineers, doctors, and teachers from every species. These were the beings who had actually made the evacuation work. They had seen the benefits of cooperation firsthand. "What if we changed the rules?" she wrote on the main display during a gathering of these practical leaders. "What if the council wasn't about controlling others but about helping everyone succeed?" The idea sparked immediate interest. The Viridian scientists suggested sharing their energy technology with worlds that needed it. The Thanax engineers offered to help rebuild damaged infrastructures. The Kalari traders proposed fair resource distribution networks. Within days, this informal network had developed detailed plans for post-storm reconstruction that were far more practical than anything the traditional council had proposed. More importantly, every species would benefit from the new arrangements. When the official council reconvened, they found themselves facing a united front of their own technical experts. The choice was simple: support the new cooperative model, or be replaced by leaders who would. Captain Sora Lim arrived at Nexus Prime just as the vote was taking place. She had been recalled from Earth to witness what everyone was calling the most important moment in galactic history. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," she told Hana as they watched the council proceedings. Every species voting to limit their own power in favor of mutual benefit. 6 months ago, getting them to agree on lunch was impossible. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Council approved a new charter based on cooperation rather than competition. Trade would be regulated to ensure fairness. Technology would be shared to help everyone advance. Conflicts would be resolved through understanding rather than force. Most importantly, Hana's communication methods were adopted as the new galactic standard. The old trial of voices was replaced with something called the trial of understanding, where species had to demonstrate their ability to truly comprehend others, not just exchange words. But the greatest honor came from an unexpected source. The Silence Keepers requested to meet with the full council, something they had never done in recorded history. Deep thought traveling spoke for their entire species. For countless ages, we have watched this galaxy struggle with communication. We have seen civilizations rise and fall because they could not understand each other. Today, for the first time, we see hope. The ancient being's thoughts turned toward Hana. The one who lost her voice to save others has given the galaxy something we thought impossible: the ability to truly listen to each other. The council voted to offer Hana any position she wanted in the new government. She could have been an ambassador, a council member, or the head of the new Department of Interspecies Understanding. Instead, she chose something different. She established the Institute of Silent Communication on Nexus Prime, where beings from across the galaxy could come to learn her methods. The building was designed to accommodate every known form of life, with environments suitable for gas clouds, crystal beings, energy entities, and everything in between. June became the Institute's chief engineer, designing new technologies to support universal communication. Dr. Seo headed the research division, documenting new discoveries about how different species could understand each other. Even Commander Vex took early retirement to serve as the Institute's administrator. On the day the Institute officially opened, representatives from over 100 species attended the ceremony. Hana stood before them all, unable to speak but somehow more eloquent than any words could have been. She gestured to the gathering and wrote on the main display, "Communication is not about having the loudest voice. It's about having the quietest heart, quiet enough to hear what others are really trying to say." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Beings throughout the chamber began communicating in their own languages: clicks, rumbles, light pulses, color changes, scent releases, and electromagnetic patterns. But instead of chaos, it created a symphony of understanding. Later that evening, Hana stood on the Institute's observation deck with June, watching the ships from dozens of worlds dock at the station. The galaxy was more connected than ever before, but now the connections were based on genuine understanding rather than just necessity. "Do you ever regret it?" June asked quietly. "Losing your voice, I mean." Hana considered the question for a long moment. Then she wrote on her personal pad, "They thought they took my voice. But they were wrong. They just taught me to use it in a way that the whole galaxy could hear." She looked out at the stars, which seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched the communication patterns flowing through the station. Somewhere out there, species that had been enemies for millennia were learning to be friends. Young beings were growing up in a galaxy where understanding was more valued than power. The last entry in her personal log that night read, "I came to the stars to be humanity's voice. Instead, I became the galaxy's silence, the quiet space, where real listening can finally happen. And in that silence, the universe had found its song."